Welcome to the Bonhoeffer Project podcast. My name is Dan Leitz. I am here joined by Father Stephen Kimbrell. It's good to have you.
Thank you.
Here today.
Thank you. I've been called that before, actually.
Have you?
Not just by my kids.
I was going to say by your kids.
No.
Yeah.
By
I think
other
we all
people.
get it, so might as well embrace it.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'm just adding titles every episode.
I'm telling you, your business card's looking full.
Oh, man. It's
For
good.
all the titles you've
It's
been given.
good.
This is good. Stephen, would you take a moment to introduce our guest today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited for us to introduce.
We've been trying to have him on for a while.
I know he's hard to get.
Yeah, he is. He's busy. He's got
He's
things.
he's a great friend. He was actually, he was my mentor in the Bonhoeffer Project.
Get out.
Yeah, he was.
Dude, we're looking at your downline.
I know.
This is great.
Brandon Bathauer.
Yes.
He's a discipleship pastor at Saddleback Church here in Southern California. And he's also on our Bonhoeffer Project leadership team.
Absolutely.
So, Brandon, it's awesome to have you on.
Absolutely awesome. I don't know why it's taken us this long.
Way overdue.
Way overdue. And it's just because you're busy scheduled. You've got babies and wives.
I do have babies.
Not
one
wives.
wife.
One wife. Okay. Just wanted to make sure. That was a test.
I passed barely.
You did.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's right, Stephen. So you were in my cohort, and then Dan was in your cohort.
Yeah.
That's right. So we got three generations right here.
You should call him
Thank
Granddad.
you. Yes, Granddad. Thank you. It's good to have you here as you gently sip from your coffee cup as a proud grandfather. That's great. I love it. I love it. So what are we talking about today, Stephen?
So one of the things that, before Brandon came on, we were talking about that's just been on his heart and mind for a while, and I think we would agree with is a really important topic. He's noticed that he's seeing the separation of discipleship and evangelism in our churches and the way we think about those two things. And so we're going to talk about that and why that's a problem. And so, Brandon, we're going to kick it to you, and maybe you could just start off and tell us how you've seen this, and if it's true, then why is that such a problem to separate those two?
Sure.
So
Yeah. So, obviously discipleship is in my heart. This is why I'm part of the Bonhoeffer Project.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I dream about. This is what wakes me up in the morning, keeps me up at night. And I serve at a church that's very oriented towards reaching unbelievers and bringing them in and building them up and sending them out. And so evangelism is very central to a lot of our churches, right? That's how churches grow. You want to reach more people for Jesus. And I had this experience. My wife and I took 2 years, and that was when we just had one baby and still just one wife, Dan.
Praise God.
Yes, good. And same wife too, so that's good. And we served for 2 years in an apartment community, serving missionally to reach people for Jesus. And so the focus on that was, how do we show Jesus' love to people who, wouldn't step into a church setting and are very far away from God. And being a discipleship guy, I kept realizing, I kept putting on two different hats. Like I would be talking to somebody who's an unbeliever, and I'd be wearing my kind of like evangelism hat. I'd be thinking in their culture. I'd be thinking about how I'm communicating to that person. And then I would show up at church and serve as discipleship pastor, and I'll be putting on my discipleship hat and thinking about how are people growing more with Jesus. And I kept thinking, does it have to be two hats? It feels like we're doing the same type of work. Like, what if we thought of these things as far more united and chasing after the same end goal and two completely different fields that barely talk to each other? And I was thinking about James Engel's scale of discipleship, if you remember, where it's kind of like -10 to 10.
Yeah.
-10 is like, they want nothing to do with God and are completely turned off by anything of religion. 0 is like a disciple is born, and then you go into. But what I find is, for the most part, people think evangelism is everything leading up to the moment of conversion.
Right.
And discipleship is everything that comes after. And that, I think, gets in the way for us in a lot of places. If discipleship is helping people journey into what it means to be an apprentice to Jesus, I think that can happen before a moment of conversion. I would point you to the disciples. When did they become a convert I don't know, but they were following Jesus for a while. Um, and then evangelism, man, if we expanded our thinking on evangelism from here's a pitch of the plan of salvation.
Yeah.
Instead, we actually went back to the root word of, evangelion, of good news. And we thought of evangelism as this broad sense of good newsing in everything that we do, proclaiming the kingdom and God's work to reconcile all things and redeem all things. Man, that would be a different picture, right? And so now discipleship is the whole thing, and evangelism is the whole thing, and that got some gears turning for him.
Yeah,
it's getting gears turning in me.
Yeah, that's good. And I think, you mentioned your church and the focus on evangelism, and I think, just typically what we see when you look at churches across the landscape, at least in America, you see some churches that's like, we're really an evangelism church, right? We're going after people. And then other people are like, hey, we're really a deep church. Yeah. We're really focused on discipleship. Yeah. And it almost, because it can appear to be this thing is like, well, you're either or.
Right.
Which one you going to be?
We're missions. It's all that.
So my question is, it seems like that's a problem. And if so, why is that a problem?
Yeah. So, I mean, it shows up, right, in like how churches look. I think you're right that there's this kind of division. And if you are a church leader, as you're thinking about your church, you probably fall into one of these two camps. There's the church that thinks about evangelism and can end up being so evangelistically focused that discipleship is kind of left out.
Yeah. Yep.
We forget that Jesus's primary route of evangelism was discipleship. The way that he got his message out to the ends of the earth was through the vehicle of discipleship. Now, the critique on an evangelistically focused church is that, it's pandering, it's thin in its theology. It will just do whatever it can to get more people to show up to the church. And I think in reality, a pastor of a church that is so focused on evangelism, they just have a passion to reach more people with the message of the kingdom. Yeah. It's outward oriented, outward facing church. And I find that a lot of these churches with a lot of people, they are actually empowering and training up and sending out a lot of people. These are very mission driven churches. But at the same time, I would offer a challenge to this type of church. If you're a church leader and you say, no, I think this is where I lean, here's kind of a challenge. Think back to Jesus's mission to spread the message of the kingdom to the ends of the earth. So if you wanted to spread a message to the ends of the earth, how would you do it? And you have all authority in heaven and on earth, like Jesus did, and you have 3 years. What are you going to do? I'll tell you what I think we would naturally do. Those of us who kind of lean more this way, it's like, dude, the best marketing campaign ever.
Yeah.
Right? Or, man, we're going to just use a megaphone over the whole earth and just tell people the message. Or we're going to have like the biggest, most awesome events with a bunch of really awesome bounce houses and get as many people there as possible and get the message to them. Now, I don't think those things are necessarily wrong in and of themselves, but that's not what Jesus did. I mean, every once in a while he would feed the 5,000 and he would speak to large crowds, but his primary vehicle of world evangelization was discipleship. That's how he decided to scale and do things best. And thing is, we got to hold to Jesus's model. Like, I think we all have a tendency to want to like hack the system.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
that's good.
How can we just speed up this process and fatten it up a little bit and get more people, reach more people faster? And man, the further we get away from Jesus' primary means of world evangelization being discipleship, it's kind of like, what we do with like chickens, like you fatten them up, you want them faster and fatter quicker. And so you pump them full of this stuff and then you get the weird stuff that we have to eat. That's kind of what happens when we try to hack the system.
Yep. So this raises a question for me, Brandon, and just speak into this if you can. If you've thought down the road this far, what does discipleship look like pre-evangelism or pre-conversion, I should say? What is that? Because if I'm listening and I'm going, okay, I'm hearing you that Jesus, my original foray into disciple making was reading the Master Plan of Evangelism, and I felt I got hoodwinked because I'm my heart is for evangelism, and Robert Coleman basically leads me into that disciple making is the process.
Yeah.
For evangelism, and I'm like, what?
Right.
But keeping with that scale of evangelism, how do we use discipleship as a tactic pre-conversion?
Yeah, I think it comes down to Jesus, the person of Jesus, right? If we are evangelizing and good newsing up to the point of conversion, then our telos, our end goal, is that decision point. But if we view all of the work we do with our neighbors and the people in our workplaces and all the unbelievers around us, not as trying to get them to that point of decision only, but helping them understand and be curious about the person of Jesus, that what we're inviting them to is apprenticeship to Jesus, well, then it ends up that you don't have an evangelism lap and then a discipleship lap, where one is about a point of conversion and one is about something else. The whole thing has the same end goal. And so you don't feel hoodwinked. I think a lot of people get this. This is why we have the problem of conversion and discipleship. Right? Is that people go, well, I've said yes to Christianity as a religion. I now have been forgiven of my past and I have heaven. I don't have to do anything else. And then we're like, oh, by the way, spend your life following this guy named Jesus. And you're like, well, I didn't even know that was part of the deal.
Yeah. No, I don't know what it is about us. I don't know if it's just us as Americans or the age we live in, but like there's this obsession we have of just putting things in nice, neat categories.
Oh, for sure.
It's either this or it's that.
And I was literally just about to put all these things into categories.
Right.
I stopped because I was like, I think this is what he's talking about. And then you just said that. So I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't just open my mouth.
Well, it's like you're either Democrat or Republican.
Yeah.
You love these things and you hate these things. And it's, there's
one wife or multiple wives. You've got, sorry.
You're hung up on that thing, aren't you?
I brought that. We're just going to keep this going. I don't know how this got into a polygamy podcast, but
when I think everything just doesn't fit into nice, neat categories. And when you do that, you lose part of the process, just a natural flow that was necessary for disciples to be made. And that's where it becomes optional, right? Yeah. Where it's like Brandon was saying, I've done the whole salvation thing. I'm just not signing up for the discipleship stuff.
But that's how we kind of see it in three categories: the unsaved, the converted, and then the discipled. Yeah. And unless we're looking at them as a whole person, and that the sanctification process is not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, maybe the Industrial Revolution had a part to play in this, and the assembly line we just, okay, we get them to say that prayer. Next thing, there's this class. Next thing, there's this thing. Next thing, start serving. All right, you're good.
Yeah.
And then it's like coasting to heaven.
Yeah, I'm sitting here, and Brandon, like, he said a lot of things.
Yes.
There. I mean, the good newsing,
that's a verb.
Like, that's
I love it.
I mean, that's putting it in English, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Which I think helps. We could do a whole podcast on that,
called
because
good newsing. I like it.
That helps people that grew up with the, hey, if you were to die today, would you go to heaven or hell?
Right.
And that's always a great
prayer
conversation.
to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a whole nother conversation.
Sure.
That's fantastic.
Somebody write that down.
But then the point you just made about trying to speed up the process.
Mm-hmm.
I think like in the chicken thing, I really get, because I grew up on a farm raising chickens,
Yeah.
and so I saw steroids happen in real time. Okay,
Sure.
I saw those chickens go from being 10 weeks to being full grown to being 5 weeks, and that ain't natural. All right,
no doubt.
and I love, but there's something that breaks down at some point when you try to speed things up. It just doesn't work.
Well, and I think, and I'll just share this personal experience. I remember one of the first guys I discipled. We have a kind of a end goal of getting guys to continue and to continue to replicate. And he was slow to do that. And so the goal, I said, you know what, I think you need to do it again. I think we need to spend more time in this process, because there just wasn't that one size fits all.
But no, he was done.
Yeah, the timer didn't go off. The little egg timer wasn't done. And I think that's part of the awareness that it is not a one size fits all, and that there are guys who are going to take a little more time, or guys that have deeper questions.
Yeah.
There are childlike faith people who are just like, man, I believe, I got it. What else do I need to do? And they're just gung-ho zealous. And then there's people that just get, I don't want to say stuck, but they've got deeper questions, that soul deep questions that need to be answered before they take that next step. And are we willing to come alongside and to wrestle and to, as Brandon put it, good news with them, right? Are we good newsing alongside them?
That's so good. Brandon, what about kind of the other side of it with churches, pastors, people that would be more on that, hey, we're discipleship and fantastic, but they kind of leave, evangelism to other people?
Yeah. So I think for this type of a church, and for a lot of us listening to Bonhoeffer Project, this may be your space. The churches that focus on discipleship without evangelism forget that Jesus's end goal for discipleship was worldwide revolution.
Right.
As Dallas Willard would put it. Like, that is the end goal of the whole thing. And we can miss it and care just about my own specific growth and then this other person's own specific growth without pointing somebody to the end goal. So the caricature of this type of a church, right, is a super closed off church full of judgmental people, and there's no connection to culture, and grumpy. And that's not been my experience either. These are pastors who are seeking to be faithful to their flock and see who is there and said, man, my job is to help people grow more like Jesus. So that's what we're going to be chasing after. We want to be good shepherds. But hey, if this is the church you're a part of, here's a challenge. If you wanted to grow the deepest and best follower of Jesus, what would you do? I would spend every second of every day with that person, drilling down maybe in the best doctrine and the best spiritual formation. And that person would be like those desert fathers who are out in the desert and man, they're fighting demons, and they're just like, we're ready. We're solid people. But what Jesus does is he spends most of his time with these disciples around the needs of the world, doing the true kingdom work. That was kind of his curriculum of discipleship, was walking alongside, showing the work that he proclaims in Luke 4 when he's quoting Isaiah 61 of sight to the blind and proclaiming the year of the Lord's favor. That's what he's doing. So the direction of Jesus-focused discipleship is evangelism, in the sake of it is good newsing and proclaiming kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. I think what ends up happening if discipleship is not outward oriented, Dan, you were saying, one of the end goals of your discipleship process is that they turn around and help others through the same process, make disciples who make disciples. If we don't add that piece, if we end with make disciples, we perpetuate what Augustine and then later Luther called the incurvatus in se, this curvature into the self. And so we hit everyone with all the best spiritual formation and the best doctrine and the best all that stuff. And what we're doing is perpetuating this selfward orientation. And without evangelism, without the sense of my job is to be a good newser in this space and in this world, then all of this ends up actually worsening the person, pulling them further away from Jesus than pressing them further into the model of Jesus.
Yeah.
That's good. So I'm hearing a book, Discipleship and Evangelism. You can't have one without the other. I'm just saying that sounds like a sounds like a good. I'm not playing on anyone. Let's see if we can get an endorsement on that. But I'm just finding that this is, I think, just another layer of the onion that's getting peeled back. Brandon, what would you say to, the pastor who, you just kind of talked about, or maybe speak to both? You've got an attractional model church, really focused in on getting people saved and baptized, but there's no real, kind of the method for discipleship is, hey, come back next Sunday, hear my sermon again. It's going to be great. And the other side of that pendulum, which is, we're deep, we're hardcore, we want you to be discipled, but we're keeping it all inside the camp. Like there's really no outreach. What would you say to kind of each side of that to draw them back into more of a balance?
Yeah, let's see. I think for the pastor of the church, or the church member of the church that is so outward oriented, to attract more and more people to the church, I would urge you, pick a name of somebody in your congregation, and ask yourself, how are they growing? How are they growing more like Jesus? I think sometimes what we can do is we want to build and hack that system. So we build really cool pathways, and, you show up to this service, then you get to this thing, and you get to this thing. And the tendency is we stop caring about the quality of that step and what it's doing in the person. And we care more about the engagement of that step. Like, how many people did we get to show up to the first timer dinner? And what we're not thinking is, what is that first timer dinner doing to help grow this person more like Jesus? So I'd urge you, think about that name of that person and really wrestle with, are you helping them grow more like Jesus?
Amen.
Or maybe take on the image instead of just your church or something else.
Sure.
Are they taking on the image of Jesus? And hopefully that will do something in your heart. So bring you back. And then I think for the church that's very oriented towards, let me care for my flock and deep in their understanding, I don't know how you'll do this, but grab a coffee with an unbeliever that you know. I don't know how you'll end up finding an unbeliever that you know, but find and don't sermonize. Sit and listen, ask questions, and while you do, pray that the Lord will soften your heart for that person. And think about all of the formation that our culture has shaped around this person. And then think, you're not the solution, but the people in your church are the solution for this person. How can you train them up for the sake of this person that's sitting across from you? I bet you something amazing would happen in you.
It's a good word.
That's really good.
Word.
I love that. And I think, speaking what you just said about, I think as believers, if we're not in relationship, in community with unbelievers, then there's a big part of our discipleship process personally that's missing, because you can't simulate that in a classroom, right? And I've met some pastors, I've met some Christians who were, man, they knew all this stuff, right? Like they knew the Bible backwards and forward, but if I'm just being blunt, they were an arrogant jerk. And I'm thinking, there's no way that unbelievers, because if you did, they would punch you in the face. You don't get to talk and act like that in the world without getting punched in the face.
For sure.
Okay. So there's a way that the threat of being punched in the face can disciple you. And I think, and that's what I'm saying. This is every church member you have an issue with, put them in a relationship with an unbeliever who will do that to them. No, I'm just kidding. But there is, like you said, there is an important piece of that Jesus had with his disciples, that forced them not to just remove from society, but to be engaged in it and to face some of that good tension of walking with Jesus and having to respond to that, and still having a heart for people that are not followers of Jesus. And that's so good.
And Stephen, if I may, you do this extremely well. I've run into you multiple times just out in the real world, and there you are with unbelievers that you are walking alongside, being in a relationship with. So, I mean, kudos to you, man. That's an example that hashtag goals.
Well,
Kimbrels.
I'll pay you.
Kimbrel life
I
goals.
pay you for what you just said. So
And
after the
just
podcast,
so y'all know, they live close to one another.
We do.
So this isn't.
yeah.
We do.
It's like, are you spying on him? What are you doing? Just like, do you put an AirTag in my pocket?
I gotta track the members of my cohorts, Dan. I gotta
Yeah.
make sure that
Yes.
That's faithful disciple making. Absolutely. A shepherd cares for his sheep. Very good. Very good. Well, gosh, Brandon, just you've given me a lot to think about. There's just a lot there. Very rich conversation. I'm looking forward to the book that you write, because that definitely sounds like right. I mean, I'm just telling you. Yeah, I'll buy it. I'll read it. We'll make sure that's on some.
as long as you write the foreword, Dan.
We'll promote it for sure.
Yeah.
We'll promote it. But super grateful for having you on, Brandon. As always, bless you, the family, and your ministry. Appreciate you coming on.
Yes, appreciate it.
And for you guys listening, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for watching, and we will catch you on the next episode. Thanks for checking out the Bonhoeffer Project podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you found it beneficial, leave us a comment. Make sure you share it with a friend. If you want more information about the Bonhoeffer Project and how we can help you formulate your own disciple-making plan, check us out at thebonhoefferproject.com. As we always say, make disciples, let Jesus build the church.